Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael King Jr. on January 15, 1921, was an American Baptist minister, activist, and political philosopher who was one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. A black church leader and the son of LA civil rights activist and minister Martin Luther King Sr. King advanced civil rights for people of color in the United States through the use of nonviolent resistance and nonviolent civil disobedience against Jim Crow laws and other forms of legalized discrimination. Dr. King, as he was fondly called, participated in and led marches for the right to vote, desegregation, labor rights, and other civil rights. He oversaw the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott and later became the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC, which he founded alongside some of his comrades. As president of the LCLC, he led the unsuccessful Albany movement in Albany, Georgia, and helped organize some of the nonviolent 1963 protests in Birmingham, Alabama. Dr. King was one of the leaders of the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of Lincoln Memorial, and helped organize two of the three Selma to Montgomery marches during the 1965 Selma voting rights movement. The civil rights movement achieved pivotal legislative gains in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States of America. He was the second of three children born to Michael King Sr. and Alberta King Nee Williams. At his childhood home, Martin Luther King Jr. and his siblings read aloud the Bible as instructed by their father. After dinners, Martin Jr.'s grandmother, Jenny, whom he affectionately referred to as Mama, told lively stories from the Bible. Martin King Jr. memorized hymns and Bible verses by the time he was 5 years old. Beginning at age 6, he attended church events with his mother and sang hymns while she played piano. Martin King Jr. witnessed his father stand up against segregation and discrimination. As an adolescent, he initially felt resentment against whites due to the racial humiliation that he, his family, and his neighbors often had to endure. In 1942, King enrolled in Booker T. Washington High School. The high school was the only one in the city for African American students. He later enrolled in Crozer Theological Seminary in Upland, Pennsylvania, and took several courses at the University of Pennsylvania. At Crozer, King was elected president of the student body. In 1951, King began doctoral studies in systematic theology at Boston University. While studying at Boston University, he met Coretta Scott, a fellow student. King married Scott on June 18, 1953, on the lawn of her parents' house in Alabama. They had 4 children: Yolanda King, Martin Luther King III, Dexter Scott King, and Bernice King. In 1957, King and other civil rights activists founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC. The group was created to harness the moral authority and organizing power of the black churches to conduct nonviolent protests in the service of civil rights reform. The group was inspired by the crusades of evangelist Billy Graham, who befriended King, as well as the national organizing of the group in Friendship, founded by King allies Stanley Levison and Ella Baker. King led the LCLC until his death. The LCLC's 1957 prayer pilgrimage for freedom was the first time King addressed a national audience. On September 20, 1958, King was signing copies of his book, Stride Toward Freedom, in Blumstein's department store in Harlem when Isola Corey, a mentally ill black woman who thought that King was conspiring against her with communists, stabbed him in the chest with a letter opener. King received first aid and then underwent emergency surgery. He remained hospitalized for several weeks. Corey, the assailant, was later found mentally incompetent to stand trial. In December 1959, after being based in Montgomery for 5 years, King announced his return to Atlanta at the request of the SCLC. In Atlanta, King served until his death as co-pastor with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He was arrested on several occasions for his involvement in civil rights campaigns, even serving a brief jail term at the Georgia State Prison. In March 29, 1968, King went to Memphis, Tennessee, in support of the black sanitation workers who had been on strike for higher wages and better treatment. On April 3, King addressed a rally and delivered his famous "I've been to the mountaintop" address at Mason Temple. King's flight to Memphis had been delayed by a bomb threat against his plane. King was booked in room 306 of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. King was fatally shot by James L. Ray at 6:01 p.m. Thursday, April 4, 1968, as he stood on the motel's second-floor balcony. After emergency surgery, King died at St. Joseph's Hospital at 7:05 p.m. King was initially interred in Southview Cemetery in South Atlanta, but in 1977, his remains were transferred to a tomb on the site of the Martin Luther King Jr. National Historical Park. The assassination led to race riots in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Baltimore, Louisville, Kansas City, and dozens of other cities. King's legacy includes influences on the Black consciousness movement and civil rights movement in South Africa. His life and works has influenced and continues to influence several leaders across the globe, in Europe, Africa, America, and the rest of the world.
I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over